Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Peyton, or you can call me PK, and I react to music. And today we are reacting to Kid A by Radiohead, the final album I said I was going to react to. I don't know if it's going to be the last one. Just to be honest with you, I don't know if it's going to be the last one. We'll find out. Need to ask some people, get some insight. You know, I'm excited. I'm excited. So, like I said, like I mentioned during the OK Computer reaction, as I mentioned during the OK Computer reaction, I actually watched a little documentary on Radiohead, just kind of see kind of a little bit of the making and things, and just kind of just know a little bit more about them. And I do know that, of course, this is the album right after OK Computer, where Tom was kind of still struggling with stuff, and he started to grow a hatred for rock music. And so this album is supposedly supposed to be very, 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 very much alternative and very experimental and all of that sort. We're 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 we can't drive right now, right? So I was like, why not do a little reaction tonight, and finish up the journey that I put myself out on. I'll probably end up doing more of their albums. To be honest with you, I might start at the beginning of the discography. But we'll see. We'll see. Okay. Okay. Anyways, we'll head into track number one. Everything in its right place. Okay, we're gonna start. We're gonna pause for 15 seconds, and I don't really care. I'm hearing what they're talking about. It's a lot. I mean, you're already hearing it. Electronic piano, some different electronic noises coming in. This is making me excited. Tom, what the fuck does that mean? What the fuck does that mean, Kobe Bryant? Oh, okay. I see it. Apparently, it's a saying in the UK. That's what Genius said. I don't really know. Oh, fuck yeah. That song got me excited. To be honest with you, it reminded me of 15 Step a little bit. Honestly, it reminded me of 15 Step a little bit. I'd be honest with you, in Rainbows, to me, a better album than OK Computer. This is reminding me of In Rainbows a little bit, especially the intro part. So I mean, I'm excited for this. I'm a sucker for alternative music. If you know anything about me, that's me. That's me through and through. So if this is what we're getting, I'm I'm so excited. See, that's actually true. That's actually true. It does kind of give you an uneasy feeling a little bit, because it's like, if you know anything about how where kind of the state Tom was at this point in time, he was pretty, he was going through a lot of shit. And so, it's kind of him just saying, like, kind of look how shit my life is at the moment. That's what the yesterday I woke up sucking a lemon means. He's like, yesterday I woke up eating sour shit for what reason, right? Like, it's just, I mean, yeah, no, that's a good way. That's a good way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it. Moving to track two, the title track of the album, Kid A. Okay. I'm really loving the amount of electronic sounds we're getting so far. Whether it's electronic piano, whether it's some sort of synth, everything, it's just, I'm enjoying it so much. Okay, we didn't have to do this. You know, I was gonna say this was giving me a bit more of an eerie vibe, a little bit, just because of No Surprises from OK Computer. I always know something that sounds a little bit more innocent, a little bit more, I don't know, just innocent. Kind of always goes down a different track of lyrics. And now we're getting not Paranoid Android, fitter happier, some fitter happier vocals. I can't tell if that's a filter or if that's a like a text to speech. Okay, I don't know. Anytime now I hear a ventriloquist or anything of that sort, it reminds me of Body Snatchers on the line where it says like basically you're not. I mean, your mouth only moves when someone's hands up your ass. Okay, but yeah, no, it's definitely not a song you'd listen to. That's kind of what I said a little bit about In Rainbows, is that you can't. I mean, it's just kind of hard to listen to it because of how it's produced, how it sounds. It's not really something you listen on a day to day basis, and there's only like what the fuck's going on with my camera? It's not like I don't listen to all of In Rainbows on like a daily basis or a weekly basis or anything like that. I really only listen to a couple songs off of it because of how deep and how different they are. It's kind of just hard to listen to them. But if you're listening to like an album setting, it's a bit easier to do so. It's also kind of the same thing with like OK Computer, with some of the songs being a little bit uneasy, like crawling up the wall. That song made me feel so fucking uncomfortable that like I was sitting there like I don't want to listen to this anymore. But it fits with the album because of kind of everything that was happening at the time with Tom and the band and everything. I think Heads on Sticks and You've Got Ventriloquist is kind of like you're having these. I don't know if I want to say that. I knew it was gonna be something fucking political. That's what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say. I knew it was gonna be. I knew I was gonna say it was gonna be something political, but I didn't want to talk about it. But now we're gonna talk about it. We've got Heads on the Sticks and they've got ventriloquists. They got people that are brainwashed in some sort of way into thinking that, and into spitting out their bullshit. Well, we've got Heads on Sticks, basically people that can't talk, and can't get through to anybody else, and they're just kind of sitting there listening to bullshit. It's kind of the way I was gonna take it, and I didn't know if that was the right way to take it until I read annotations, because people are smarter than me. And I was gonna say another thing that makes this album and OK Computer a lot worse to listen to, a lot harder to listen to, is just due to the fact of knowing how bad of everything Tom was going through at the time while he was writing all this shit. Knowing kind of what was happening and listening to this, it's like it's kind of like it's quite literally seeing into the mind of someone that kind of struggles with mental illness but also creates art. They a lot of times when you're going through shit, you'll make things a lot more abstract. You won't go with the norm. You want to go away from the norm, and at that time their norm was rock. And so the first album they make where Tom's like, I don't want anything to do with rock, they stray as far away from it as possible. And that's what this is. I mean, this is the result. This is the result. Yeah, that's kind of the way I'm seeing it. It's just somebody that's kind of going through the ringer, and they create art, so they kind of express it the way they kind of do it. I mean, okay, sorry, we're pausing again. When artists, a lot of times successful artists, they make art based off their emotions and what they're feeling. Right, that's the best way to do it. It's the easiest way to do it because they're the only ones that know how they're feeling and know how to express it. Like you said, with Van Gogh losing his mind the last few years of his life, it's kind of the same thing. It's Tom losing his fucking mind. It's Tom losing his fucking mind while writing music, and it's kind of like he's just trying to express what's going on in his head. That's where you get a lot of these lyrics from, the randomness. The strings. I'm ascending. I'm ascending. I'm ascending. It's hard to say I didn't enjoy that track towards the end. After the third verse and everything like that, getting into it. Um, I mean, of course, vocal wise, it's kind of hard to enjoy it a little bit because it's so robotic. But especially knowing Tom's vocals and how he can sing, it's like kind of got to pick and choose a little bit with it. But it's a little dark, right? That's the way I feel listening to it. It's a little dark, so it makes you a little uneasy, a little uncomfortable, because again, like I said, where he's at mentally in this point in time, and everything seems a little random, right? And I feel like it's kind of normal for everything to see a little random because again, it's an outsider trying to look into somebody else's mind. In reality, it's an outsider trying to see into somebody else's mind. So it's hard to really get what he really means by these lyrics. That's kind of what I noticed a little bit. In general, when I can't understand something, like genius. Usually, when I can't understand something, people of genius can't understand either, right? Because these artists make it a little bit more vague, a little bit harder to understand because it's just kind of how they feel at the time. So that's kind of been a common theme within Radiohead's album so far is that it's so heavily emotion driven and life experience driven that it just it just makes sense. I don't know how to explain it. It just makes sense. It's so emotionally driven that it's hard to really make out exactly what they mean by this stuff. Also, as I said, and it's kind of selfish to say it, but when people go through pain, people go through life, go through the different aspects of life, and people maybe go through addiction and things of that sort. They make some of the best music that you'll ever hear because these people are trying to explain the way they feel, kind of trying to show the world the way they feel. And when you can't necessarily just sit down and explain it to somebody, but you can put it into music and sounds, it makes it beautiful. And so, no, will I listen to this track every day? No, I can't. It won't stop me from sitting here and saying that it's still a very beautiful track in the sense of how life is, if that makes any sort of sense. Yeah, see, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying, and I said that I don't know the other day that people that can make music that makes you feel a certain way without experiencing what they're talking about or what they're trying to portray is good music. That's good music. And so that's what I was kind of saying is like when people can't sit down and verbally tell you like this is how I feel, this is what's going on, and this is how my mind, the space in my mind feels. Well, so when they can't just sit down and tell you that, they try to put it into something else. And so now here we're seeing it put it into music. And so it's dark, right? The music's kind of dark. It's a little eerie. It's a little uncomfortable because that's what he's feeling at the time. We'll head into track 3, the national anthem. Dude, fuck Apple Music. For the second time, track number 3, the national anthem. Is it gonna fucking open? I mean, is it gonna fucking open? For the third time, we'll head into track 3, the national anthem. I'm liking the bass. The bass and drums right now is really reminding me of In Rainbows. Some more filtered vocals. I think the abstract aspect of this album so far is like I said, when you go through depression, your mind gets very cluttered. And, well, not just depression, anxiety as well. Your mind gets extremely cluttered, right? And so you get to the song, and it starts out with just the bass and the drums. It's not cluttered, and then you kind of add some synths, and then you add some just random horns here and there, and then you get to these vocal effects, and it sounds a little bit odd, a little bit off, and then you just kind of get more of these random sounds coming in, and of course as I've always said, they use their tracks really well. They're different, you know, right and left tracks really well. And so they kind of just throw them in different sides and everywhere, and it's just real abstract. And to me, you know, as like I always say, as my title insinuates, you know, I kind of look at it more of a psychology standpoint. As you know, as you go through depression and stuff like that, your mind gets extremely cluttered, right? It's hard to really stay focused on something, you know. So if Tom really wanted to stay focused on one sound right here, but it's just kind of hard for him to, because you know you're kind of going through all this shit. You're going through all this shit. You know, just say he wanted to stay with that bass line and that drum pattern. You know, they came in one day to the studio and they came up with that, and it's like, that's great. You know, I love it, let's keep with it. And then, you know, all of a sudden Tom's like, hey, let's throw some horns in there. And then he starts singing. He's like, no, I want some effects on that. You know, and, you know, everybody kind of sits there and like, why? You know, why? But to him, it makes sense because that's kind of just how cluttered his mind is, that, you know, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. And it just kind of comes out that way. It's kind of something I've preached when it came to Radiohead so far, is that they seem to leave everything up to interpretation a little bit. They seem to kind of let it, you know, like you said, just kind of up to you to figure it out. They kind of just let you figure it out and let you interpret it the way you kind of need to and way you want to. That way, it's not like set in stone, like this is what this song's about, this is what this lyric means. You know, you kind of do it the way you need to. Could be an embodiment of anxiety. That's another thing that could definitely be it. Anxiety, you know, thoughts go in and out, you know, at an extremely fast pace. And I have a feeling there's going to be at least one song on here that's going to be the literal physical, not physical, but it's going to be it's going to be there's going to be a song on here that's going to be the embodiment of anxiety. So far, there's been at least one song in each album that I've listened to that has been that. You'll sit there and you'll just listen to it like, yeah, like this is what we're doing, because it induces the feeling of anxiety. You know, it induces that kind of nervousness, that, you know, cold sweats almost, you know, the mind racing, like what's happening, what's going on, I'm scared, you know, things of that sort. I have a feeling there's gonna be at least one on here that's gonna be exactly like that. Again with, you know, horns. See, now I'm almost fully in agreement with you about this being the embodiment of anxiety. There's also been at least one that's also been the embodiment of a panic attack. And to me, this is kind of what a panic attack is almost. If I were to take a guess, this song, you know, of course, it started out not super calm, but it started out calm in comparison to the rest of it and relative. And then, you know, right now we're going through, you know, louder horns, a lot more random shit, you know, kind of just getting tied together, thrown together. And I have a feeling this is going to die down. We're going to get back to the basics of the bass line plus the drums, and that's how they're going to end the song. Did it end up? Hold on. Okay, the first thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to talk about my personal preference of music, just because I want to talk about it, because I like talking about my personal preference of music. Not everybody would like music like this, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious as to why. You know, there's a lot of people listen to music for the sound, a lot of people listen to music for lyrics. I listen to music because of the feeling. I like seeing kind of what an artist is going through. I mean, that album right there, Care for Me by Saba, released in 2018, in my opinion, the best album that came out that year. You know, exemplifies anxiety and fear of in the environment that you live in. This album right here, 21 Pilots self-titled album, is the embodiment of anxiousness as well as religious abuse and things that happened that have long lasting effects on your life from your childhood. And that's the kind of the music that I enjoy, is music that makes you feel. There's another album that should be up there in place of this one. That's Freudian by Daniel Caesar, one of my favorite R&B albums to exist. It just sounds good. But I'm going to be getting a new poster to replace it. It's going to be People Watching by Sam Fender, because that album makes you feel things that kind of just are associated with everyday life. Grief, loss, anxieties, struggles with, just regular day-to-day life, and things of that sort. But that's what I listen to music for, is music. I listen to music to feel. So, some people might say I'm crazy for enjoying this song as much as I did. But getting a little glimpse into the mind of Tom York is kind of what I see through this and what I feel through this. And it's kind of I see an anxious mind. I see a depressed mind of someone that can't sort through the clutter. They can't get away from it. And they feel it closing in. And that's why at the end of the song, I guess wrong, of course, as per usual, I guess wrong. But at the end of the song, instead of it ending with the bass line getting back to normal and being like a panic attack, it ends up just ending with the horns. And they get louder, they get closer, they get, more whatever, and then they come in Houston. And it's almost like the walls are kind of closing in on him. So it started out with the bass line, which is normal day-to-day life, his normal train of thought. And then the horns start coming in, and it's all the clutter. That's all the clutter. And then as they get louder and louder and louder, they start kind of taking over his brain a little bit. And then to the point whenever everything else drops out from under it and it's just the horns, that's whenever, it kind of almost fully taken over. And so that's the way I see this. That's how I interpret it. There's not much to look at really here with the lyrics. I mean, even Genius said we don't have any idea basically what it means. It's all up for interpretation. We're just kind of guessing. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I enjoyed it. I'm enjoying this so far. Actually, it's just knowing the context. Like I said, just knowing the context. It's kind of what I expected, but it's everything I ever wanted out of Radiohead when I heard alternative. We'll head into track number 4, How to Disappear Completely. I like that soaring kind of guitar. I'm also liking the acoustic. That kind of high pitched, I guess, synth. It's making it a little bit uneasy. It's kind of hard for it not to be uneasy with the title track. A little more straightforward here. Music kind of sets the tone sonically with the acoustic, with the kind of like I think now I'm thinking about it, I think it's an elongated electric guitar playing a really high note up in the right ear, and then it feels like almost as if it's kind of like the come down. When you're coming down from an anxiety, it's almost like, how I said last track was an anxiety attack. It was almost the embodiment of an anxiety attack. This is like when you're coming off of it, when you don't want to admit that, that wasn't you. That's basically what you're saying. Like, me during that anxiety attack isn't me. That's not what I know me as. That's not who I am, everything of that sort. And now he's saying I'm not here, this isn't happening. Like, he can't believe that what he's doing. And what I was gonna say, it feels like dying. It's not it's not calm, but it's relief that maybe he didn't go through with plans. Maybe it's a little bit of regret, of what he was feeling. I understand how that feels, having that little bit of regret, of being like that. And, maybe it's a little bit also of dissociation, with the I walk through walls, I go where I please. When you're dissociated, you feel as if you're out of your body. And you're kind of, I guess the way to see it visually, if I want to tell you visually, it's kind of like you're watching yourself in third person. Mentally, it feels like you're talking to yourself within your mind. When you dissociate, you kind of are away from your body. That's what it feels like. And so maybe that's what he's talking about here. Maybe he's talking about how he's not here and this isn't happening, as if he's watching himself do it, go through what he's going through. And, I get that too. I get that. So this one feels a little bit more straightforward. It feels like it's kind of more in my head of what he's talking about. I don't really know yet fully. I guess we'll see. But it feels a little bit more eerie than some of the tracks, and more of a straightforward eerie way rather than a, kind of a abstract eerie way. Horns back. Horns back. It's kind of. I'm gonna pause again. I'm sorry. Horn being back kind of makes me feel as if what I was saying about anxiety is true, and it being kind of the come down, the relief of, an anxiety attack that was the last track, and so kind of it still lingering in his mind, something that would happen. I was gonna say this. I was gonna wait till the end of the song to say it, but OK Computer was very sad in the sense of it was more of a happy sad, masking kind of sad. When someone will put a smile on their face, put a mask on every day, but in deep down they really are feeling something different. So it's kind of the way they show it is Tom was trying to seem like he was perfectly okay while he wasn't. So his creative decisions were kind of to portray that. This is kind of a bit more straightforward of sound wise. We're getting a bit more into slower, more somber tracks, and even when they're not slower and somber, they're more abstract, and they're kind of giving you a bit more space to feel. They just feel a little bit more eerie. They feel a little bit, make you feel a little uncomfortable, a little uneasy. Enjoying it. I'm very much enjoying it. First off, beautiful song, very much so with the strings. And this is what I like about music. This is why this is why I told you not to shut up, because music can make one person, and music especially like this can make you interpret it one way, make another person interpret it the other way. See, you see it as that. I saw it towards the end, maybe kind of right after the strings, right before the end, when everything got super dissonant and it got super loud. To me, that's kind of the anxiety still reminding him that it's still there. It's the anxiety reminding him, like, hey, yo, you're like, I'm still here. And to me, the bridge, when he's talking about strobe lights, blowing speakers, fireworks, hurricanes, it's kind of him reminiscing on the panic attack. And again, the just really loud, the horns. I don't even know what the hell all was in there. It was just a lot of shit. There was a lot of shit in there. And to me, that's kind of him. It's kind of the anxiety within him reminding him like, yo, I'm still here. It's kind of seeping into it. So to me, this track is kind of like the calm, the relief of the anxiety tags over, but I'm still feeling it. Like I'm still gonna have to go through it. All in all, good track, beautiful track. I loved it. Track number 5. Treefingers. What, I feel like something's gonna come out here. And it not just be like super serene and calming. It's already getting a little bit louder. So something I'd listen to like at night while I'm trying to sleep. Not in a bad way though. Okay, I've said this the past two album reactions when it came to Radiohead. They know how to use their tracks so well that it's almost like, you know, instead of, because, you know, when it comes to audio, there's only two tracks, the left and the right, right? You know, there's nothing that can make it go higher, make it go lower, make it go in the front, make it go in the back. The way they make their sounds work, it makes it feel like something's on top of each other. And I think a lot of it has to do with just pitch and tone. But, you know, I like how they were introducing sounds up into the right ear to kind of still stimulate, you know, a little bit of your mind, make sure you're still paying attention, you know, while they're just going on. To me, I feel like this kind of cements my theory of the national anthem kind of being a panic attack, while How to Disappear Completely is a bit more of the come down from it. Well, because now you're at the, you know, kind of the more serenity part of coming down. You know, after the dopamine and serotonin hits your body, hits your brain, you know, from after the panic attack, it kind of makes you feel like this. You know, you'd have no thoughts. You know, you kind of just sit there and not really enjoy, but you sit there and you're at peace with yourself and with everything. You know, because when you first initially come down from it, you're still kind of thinking of, you know, what the fuck just happened. But then after about a couple minutes, you kind of start to turn into this, where it's a bit more peaceful in your mind. You know, so a lot of it has to do with, like I said, the serotonin hit that you kind of get afterwards. Yeah, no, it's just real peaceful, real calm. It was an interlude. That's what it says, at least. No, it's good. It's good. So we get into track number 6, Optimistic. Sitting in the right ear right now. A little bit of distortion on that guitar. Feels almost as if he's kind of mocking you when he says the best you can is good enough. After saying that, you know, the big fish eat a little fish and that it's not his problem, just give me some. You know, it's not his problem that there's some people that kind of have an advantage and, you know, an up over somebody else. And so then him going to saying the best you can is good enough kind of feels a little bit kind of like a mock. You know, he's kind of mocking you. He's like, you know, you could try the best you can, but I promise you it's good enough. While he's sitting there, he's like, you know, I don't really give a shit. You know, that's just the way I take that. Drums are real tom heavy. I like the song so far. I guess he's kind of playing on the big fish, little fish thing, like a little bit of cat in the hat. Not cat in the hat. What the fuck? Okay. I mean, no, yes, cat in the hat, but Dr. Seuss is what I meant to say. It seems like this one, you know, repetition is kind of a play on words when it comes to the big fish, little fish, Dr. Seuss type shit. I made that connection. Let me see if they made that connection. Apparently I'm the only one that made that fucking connection. Okay. Sure. 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 Okay, so we're going with another. This is even a bit more straightforward than what I was getting at earlier. If you're here for my title, I bet you're excited right now. Nervous Messed Up Marionette. If I remember correctly, a marionette is a doll or a person, something of that sort that's being controlled by somebody else. And the way, again, I see that is dissociation. Like I said, when you're dissociated, you kind of almost as if see yourself in third person, and the person that you are looking at as in yourself is not within control, and you cannot control it. And so the part where you're saying I'd really like to help you ties into that, as you can't control yourself, and so you can't, you'd love to help somebody else, but you can't really do anything because you're not in control. I love when things come together. And I don't even know if I'm fucking right or not, but I just know it made sense in my head, so I said it. That's kind of why I'm here. That's what all reaction YouTubers do. They give their own thoughts and shit. So that's what I'm gonna do. It's the puppets with the strings. Yeah. So they're being controlled by somebody else. Yeah. Whenever Genius tells me that it can go one of two ways and they don't really know what it means exactly, I always just click off of it because I'm like, okay, I'm not supposed to understand what you're trying to tell me. Okay. Jazzy ending. That was the transition. Okay. That's kind of how Radiohead is. If you haven't listened to any of the other stuff, it seems like at the time, because this was back in 2000, they were a bit more concerned with making art. And also at the time, I guess if you're really kind of going to go into it a little bit, talking about mental health was very taboo. It wasn't something you did, right? It was something you'd get flamed for. It's something that people would go off on you for, people that would shun you for, because it's just not something you talked about, right? It's not something you would talk about. So this was the easiest and best way for, in my opinion, the way for them to do it at the time of showing like, yo, I'm going through shit. To me, and like I said, I listen to music to kind of feel it. To me, I can connect with it through the way it sounds, because in my head, I'm like, okay, if I were to make music, it would sound like this. If that makes any sort of sense. If I were to make music, it was going to sound like this, because that's the way my mind is kind of feeling. So that's the way I feel about it. And again, that's a great thing about music. That's a great thing about music, is that everybody can take music the way they need to take it and the way they want to take it. And no one's interpretation is wrong. No one's, way of thinking is wrong. There's a reason why, people make videos like this, because people like seeing different perspectives on things. And, and there's a reason why people like, dislike certain things. There's a reason why people like certain things, because music is meant to be taken in the way it needs to be. Yeah, anyways, no, I really enjoyed that. Sonically, it was great. Again, a bit more straightforward of a song. It's not as vague as some of them on the album has been so far. I was hearing a transition at the end of that song, so I will go back and start it from the end, and then we'll head from the end of track 6, Optimistic, into track 7, In Limbo. almost being like drowned in those guitars. See, now, on the contrary to OK Computer and In Rainbows, instead of the guitars being in one ear or the other, you're having it being in both ears, and they're at the top of the tracks, or louder than they normally are. That lyric reminds me of "I'm Still Fine" by the Red Clay Strays. What a pull! What a pull! What a pull! Completely different genre. Completely different genre. With the line that they have where basically they're saying, people here living it up, and I think they're blind, because they don't have what I have, but in reality they probably do have what I have. They're just not seeing it. Him saying that you're living in a fantasy world is talking to somebody else that doesn't realize that they're probably going through shit, or at least they will at some point, and they live in it's kind of like almost like an ignorance is bliss mindset. That's what they're living in. They're living in an ignorance is bliss mindset. And, it comes back to bite you at some point. Trapdoors that open, I spiral down, could be alluding to depression. The trapdoor being depression, and him spiraling is a common concept in that field, I guess. I will say even more so, I feel like Tom was a bit deeper into his shit at this point in time than he was during OK Computer. I think the touring from OK Computer probably drove him a bit deeper into what he was going through, rather than I think it was kind of more of the start of everything, while this is kind of the embodiment of everything. I'm going to keep pausing it. I'm just going to keep doing this. Anytime I hear anything that I want to talk about. I'm lost at sea, don't bother me, I've lost my way. It feels like this song is more of an awareness song. Him saying in the first verse, I'm on your side and there's nowhere to hide. Him basically saying like, yo, I'm on your side in terms of I care about your health, and I care about your mental health. And there's nowhere to hide, in the sense that now that I'm on your side, and I'm kind of telling you like, there's nowhere to go. You have to listen to me now. And then he kind of explains all this shit. Now he's explaining, I'm lost at sea. I'm lost in the middle of, again, all this shit. And that he's lost his way. He doesn't feel like himself anymore. And so, again, this feels a little bit more straightforward than some of these have been so far. This feels like more of an awareness song than anything. Kind of the way he made that sound like water makes me kind of think he was trying to represent a hurricane, kind of how he explained it. In one of the other tracks, I think it was the last track. I was reading kind of just what this meant, because I didn't know. It kind of just said I think it kind of just explains the track title in Limbo, which I think in Limbo can go a pretty straightforward way. Again, like I said, it just really feels like more of an awareness track. It feels like, he's kind of trying to just alarm people that like, yo, you might be living in a world that, isn't what you think it is. It isn't what it seems. You think it's all sunshine and rainbows. Well, I'm on your side. I care about you, but this is what can happen, and this is what might happen to you. So it's kind of in a caring way. That's the way I took it. Is just that he's kind of just trying to explain to people like, yo, like this is what I'm going through right now, and you could be going through the same thing. And right now you're kind of living in this fantasy where you don't think anything's wrong. You think it's all sunshine and rainbows, that you have no issues, no problems, you can't complain about anything. Well, here we are. It can happen to anybody. It sounded like there was a transition, because We're at 1 second left in the track, and it kept going, so I'm just gonna assume that there is. It did sound very much like chaos, which, again, actually, this actually brings up a good point. Depression, and I think it kind of adds to the representativeness of depression. You know, when you're depressed, not only is your mind, it's not silent, but it's so loud, and there's so many different things going on that you can't understand what's happening, I guess. So kind of a chaos. It's almost just like chaos, like, and the way that track ended, it sounded like chaos too. And I agree with that. We'll get into track number 8. I'm expecting transition here. We'll see if I am right. Oh shit. Okay, there wasn't a transition. I'll just shut the fuck up now. Track number 8. What is that? Idioteque? Yeah. Okay. I feel like that kind of not confirms what I was saying, but it kind of helps my theory of what it's about. Him kind of, it feels like a panic almost, not really just a panic, but like not like a panic attack, but just like panic, anxiety, things kind of flowing. Ice Age coming, Ice Age coming. What does that mean? What do you mean Ice Age is coming? It's kind of like almost like dare I say, a manic episode, almost, where you kind of just saying all this shit. But him then going into, we're not scaremongering in terms of, this is really happening. It's really happening. It just kind of feels like almost like a manic episode where you're kind of just saying things and you really believe that this is going to happen. This is really going to happen. But in reality, it's not happening. And people are telling him like, like, it's not really happening. It's not really happening. But he's like, he swears it's happening. And then you go into take the money and run. It's like you're kind of just, that's really what it feels like. It feels like a little almost like a manic episode, where you're kind of just all over the place. You can't really control what you're saying or what you're doing. You're kind of just doing it, almost. Yeah, like I said, it kind of feels like a manic episode almost. A manic episode where it's kind of just, it is the randomness. It is the randomness. Kind of just random, synth sounds coming in. Just random sounds in general coming in. And then the randomness of the randomness of the lyrics. Yeah, no. It's really just what it feels like. And the repeat of the vocals like this, where it's not the full thing. Another transition that I fucked up. Yeah, no, it's just the randomness of the track. I mean, that's one thing about Radiohead is I will always read any information they're gonna give me that isn't. I don't know exactly what this means, because that means it's supposed to be leftover interpretation. This is telling me pretty much kind of what they're trying to say. Here's the paranoia of emerging technology, basically paranoia around nuclear warfare. I don't believe that. I feel like there's more to it. It's just like Apple telling me that Apple telling me that House of Cards off in Rainbows was about sex. I don't know what the fuck they were talking about, because that song is nowhere near anything about sex. This has nothing to do, I mean, other than the fucking words bunker, it has nothing to do with fucking nuclear shit, okay? To me, I'm thinking this feels really more like a manic episode. It feels like somebody that is going through some shit, and is so worried about random things happening, so paranoid about random things happening that, he's kind of driving everybody around him crazy and telling him like, you're just, that's not real, it's not real. And then finally someone comes and critiques him, like, you're scaremongering. And he's like, no, I'm not. It's really happening. It's really happening. And when you're going through a manic episode, you really believe that everything that you think is happening is happening. I'm not really an expert on that. I know a little bit about it, but that's kind of the way I took it. Love it. I love it when they do that, dude. Uh, Other than that, I mean, I really don't know how else to interpret the song other than what they've given me, because I wouldn't have taken it any other way. Also, basically, Tom said it's not about a divorce. Okay, so then what the fuck is it about? So Tom said that basically he had some sort of ghost in the house that he moved into that loaded a drive with music. Then it got deleted. But on that drive was Morning Bell, and somehow he just remembered how to do it and recreate it. But then also, apparently in another interview, he said that the song also might be about divorce. So I guess you just take it whatever the fuck way you want to take it. So I'm going to take it as in the divorce. But anyways, we'll get into track number 10, Motion Picture Soundtrack. Bass, dude, holy shit. Like, it kind of reminded me of Videotape, the closing track off of In Rainbows, as it's kind of more of, well, I don't know, that one's a bit more depressing, I guess, kind of sounding. This is a bit more eeriness and beautifulness, right? It starts off with the bagpipes and organ, I think, and then drives into everything. I mean, uh, had a harp going around everywhere, everything like that, and it was beautiful. But then you start reading the lyrics, and it becomes kind of more of a uncomfortable beautiful, a little bittersweet, like they say. I mean, basically, it kind of, I see why it's a common interpretation that Morning Bell is about divorce, because here he's talking about, basically almost like a failed relationship, about how, red wine and sleeping pills kind of brings this girl back, and how cheap sex and watching sad films with her helps him get back to where he wants to be, which is comfortability. But then he tells her, stop sending letters, they always get burned. This isn't like the movies where, they tell you that, all these relationships are supposed to be perfect, and if you send me letters all the time, I cherish them and do all that. He's like, no, they get fucking burned. So they fed us these white lies, and if Morning Bell's really about divorce, and he's kind of talking about like, we're fucking over, like, why do you keep doing this? And then he ends the song with, I'll see you in the next life, saying that maybe in another world this could have worked out. I mean, this kind of felt like, I guess we'll see. This felt like probably more of an outro track than the next one might, which is untitled, 53 seconds. But I guess we'll get into that, and then I'll share the rest of my thoughts. So this is Genius said this is a bonus track, technically like a hidden track. This kind of reminds me of what was it, Treefingers? The interlude. So it's just, yeah, no, motion picture soundtrack was a very good closer to this album. Overall, this album was beautiful, right? And although it might not have been beautiful in the sense of, actual pure beauty, it's more of how people say life is beautiful. People say, hey, life is beautiful. But then you look at life and there's people that struggle, people that, go through shit. And there's people that, unfortunately end theirs. And, it's dark. But then on the other side, it's bright, right? So there's two sides to it. And so when I think about life, when someone says life is beautiful, I think of, yeah, hauntingly beautiful. In the sense of life is what's letting me talk right now. Life is what's letting me talk to you right now. And life is what's going to let me post this. But in the same realm, life is also what makes people suffer. And life is what causes people, life is inevitably what causes people to pass. Because that's just part of life. So this album, in the sense of that, is very beautiful, but hauntingly beautiful. You really explore the head of Tom York within this album. You see the struggles he goes through, and you see a little bit how he copes with them. But for the most part, this is art, and I don't know, it was beautiful. I loved it. It's a bit more my speed when it comes to music. A bit more my speed when it comes to music. I kind of enjoy a bit more abstract things a bit more than I will a little bit straightforward. But at the same time, I still kind of enjoy everything almost as equally. I just usually find something to love out of everything. So, yeah, no, great album. Ended great. I mean, all the tracks were great. I can't really give you my favorite so far. If I were to say one for the time being, it would be either In Limbo or How to Disappear Completely. They were two very great songs. But besides that, if you would like to check out the after saying all that and then immediately going to plug my Patreon is insane. I'm sorry. If you'd like to check out the Patreon to see this full album uncut, unedited version of this reaction, you can check me out at PK Reacts or at the link in the description. It's only $1 to subscribe. And you can see all of the past stream VODs and all the future ones as well, if you would like to do that. If you'd like to watch me react to these albums live, you check me out on Twitch at PKReacts112 or at the link in the description. I don't know if this is going to be the end of my Radiohead journey. We will find out. If it is, I enjoyed it very much so. You can see why they're as popular as they are. It was beautiful. Stay safe. Stay alive. I love you. Bye.